Indiana is for the bold, and we're boldly embracing the energy transition. Top 5 clean energy in development. Indiana anchors the Midwest's $1 billion hydrogen hub. Over $33 billion in new investment from sustainable companies in agrovoltaics and wind farming, electric vehicles and batteries, clean energy. And we're partnering with Andretti Formula E to bring Indiana's all-electric race team to iconic cities across the globe. Indiana for the bold.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining me today, Andrea.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amit. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, let's jump straight into it. Now, Indiana's background is in production and manufacturing. Can you talk about how you've come to be a hub for generating clean energy and technologies?
Most definitely. So Indiana, we're a state that grows things and we make things, and that's truly in our DNA. So when we look at how the state's economic development agency, my role, it is how we do that with an eye towards sustainability, but also knowing that we are the center of those heavy to abate and hard to abate industries, right? So on the generation side, what that looks like is a concerted effort to work with our utilities on generation. So we're actually the 4th in the country from the US for clean energy and development, right? So that we're going to have the needs and the clean energy needs to be able to continue that investment. You see up on the screen, we have recently received one of the designations by the US government for hydrogen hubs. So again, this is another way, not hypothetical, that we're bringing new energy sources, new fuels to these hard to abate industries to be able to make a meaningful impact. And it's even in the sectors we have. So we have 5 OEMs in the state of Indiana, traditional automotive manufacturing. But as we start to see that transition to electric mobility, we are starting to see how we take our workforce, how we take our battery ecosystem and turn that into producing that next generation of EVs. And we've had some exciting announcements, whether it's Samsung SDI and Stellantis or GM, that this is all happening, and it's happening in real time.
So as we collectively work to build a green or greener economy, what gaps are we faced with? How is Indiana poised to help? And why are subnational and local voices important?
Well, that's a great question, and it's a really nice segue from what we were just hearing in the panel before that. So here at the backdrop of COP28, we have really lofty rhetoric. We have ambitious goals. We talked a lot about the tripling renewables. So how do we actually accomplish that, right? How do we build what that is? And if you look at Indiana, where actually 25% of the US steel is made in the state of Indiana. It's an economic engine, it's a driver. So what do you need to make, for solar? You need racking. What do you need to make electric vehicles? Steel and other metal components. For wind turbines, it's concrete, it's cement. It's these materials that are gonna really be the underpinnings of the energy transition, and it's not hypothetical. So Indiana, it's not perspective, right? We are poised to manufacture the energy transition, and we're poised to do it now. So when you ask what Indiana can do to kind of fill those gaps, I think it's a few things that we offer uniquely. One is speed to market. So again, we have the site readiness, we have the manufacturing workforce, technicians, the universities in our state who can offer those advanced degrees. Purdue University is actually the #1 degree granting programming for graduates who support EV, right? Rose-Hulman, the #1 in the US for undergraduate research universities in engineering. So again, you might not have heard of this, but these are all the components that when we have investors come to us, those are the things they need to develop and get those projects off the ground. So again, we lead right now in the #1 state for sustainable building materials, and we see a huge opportunity to have that leadership role in battery manufacturing as well as solar manufacturing.
Nice. Now, shifting the focus to sustainability, what role do sustainability and innovation play in an economic strategy like Indiana's?
I mean, it's crucial. It is the role, right? So when I talked a little bit about what that momentum could be for manufacturing the green economy, on the flip side of it is how do we do it cleaner and better and faster? So, part of that is really how we look at where the opportunities for decarbonization are. So one fact that I'll throw out there, there's a county called Lake County, Indiana. It's in the northern part of our state. And it actually has about 400 million tons per annum of carbon emissions. That's more than London. That's more than Berlin. But also, when you look at the state of Indiana, 1/3 of our GDP comes from steel manufacturing. So you have this tug of how do we move forward economic growth, but how do we focus on those industries that can have an outsized impact? And that's through carbon capture, right? That's through hydrogen. That's, we talked in the last panel about how important it is for demand and some of the offtake agreements. That's not hypothetical. We have the demand in our state, and those agreements are happening. We'll be bringing some of that first supplies of hydrogen in 2025, right? So it is there, and it is ready to make an impact. With carbon capture in the southern part of our state, we have a great company called Heidelberg Materials. And through kind of looking at their DOE feed studies, Department of Energy feed studies, and the geological makeup of Indiana, there's a huge potential for carbon capture technology to make a huge impact in that part of the state as well. So it's going to be that kind of company leadership as well as state leadership on the policy side. We just passed legislation to be more friendly towards carbon capture that's going to make an impact in these certain industries.
And how does Indiana support the sustainability efforts of the companies it tries to attract, both for expansion and coming to set up?
I mean, it's one of the most important factors, right? So when you see these large-scale announcements come to our state, whether it's in electric vehicles or semiconductors, the number one need is clean energy generation, right? So it's having that mix of bringing more renewables online. It's now the hydrogen hub has been a huge investment, attraction tool. So it's how do we start to match those needs and be forward-looking to make sure that we have capacity to do that. And then again, it's the workforce. I can't stress that enough. The companies will need to have the skilled technicians as well as the degree programs that support this, right? So when you have a Purdue University that I mentioned earlier, or Indiana University that is in the audience today that's really leading the way and kind of high impact climate solutions in the state, or Notre Dame, it's that ecosystem that is really appealing to our companies to know that when they're there, they can see those projects in development and they can see success. The last thing I'd note on that, because you think about some of these traditional industries, it's the newer industries too. I loved seeing the announcement from Semi the other day about how to have more sustainable practices in semiconductors. It's a huge area of growth for our state. So again, how are we looking to some of our site readiness? We have a new LEAP Innovation District in our state that's kind of marrying this idea of sustainable sites, from the beginning with these critical industries that need to have that.
Now, before we wrap up, we've heard today about Indiana's legacy in heavy industry and advanced manufacturing. And we know you also have a global reputation for agriculture and motorsports. Can you share a few examples of how the state is innovating in these other traditional disciplines, which might not exactly be known for their sustainability practices?
No, I appreciate that. This is kind of one of the most fun things about my job is to share more about what Indiana is or what you may have heard about Indiana. So in agriculture, again, there's so many diverse examples of how we're coupling innovation with sustainability. So the idea of agrivoltaics, that's taken hold in the huge swaths of farmland that is now being used for solar generation. And no longer is it kind of the either or. It's either a solar field or it's farm field. I mean, I grew up on a farm in the Midwest, so I know how important it is to those communities. But the idea that you can raise your crops but also raise the energy for your community is something that's really taking hold on kind of that local level. Or on the flip side, we talked a lot about carbon capture, one of the byproducts being ammonia. So that actually represented a huge opportunity in Indiana where the ammonia needed for fertilizers was actually a way that farmers were able to rely less on imported ammonia, but use some of that byproduct from heavy industry and bring that back into a more circular economy. So it's not one thing, it's a lot of different things that are happening in our state from our stakeholders, from our companies, from our local communities to do that. And now racing. I think, I won't do a survey of who's been here to Indiana before, but I think you probably have heard of that. Thank you. The Indy 500. So, Amit, apologies for this, but it's where the rubber meets the road of sustainability and motorsports. And again, it's across the board. So we have some partners from, I think, Andretti Autosports and Formula E that you're going to hear more about at the dinner. So it's how do you even turn racing on its head that you're pushing the boundaries of technology in electric mobility, but also still in that human competition. I went to my first race in London this past July, and it was fantastic. I felt that same thrill, that same kind of excitement around the race. But even in traditional motorsports, so last May, we have a biannual event called the Indiana Global Economic Summit that brings together diplomats, industry leaders, and we have this kind of titans of motorsports with the Penske's, Firestone, and others, and they were talking about even the materials into racing are becoming more sustainable, whether it's the tires, the composites, that they're doing more with less, they're going faster with less. So it's super exciting to be there. We'll be having the Global Summit again next May. It's on the weekend of the Indy 500, so we hope to see you all there, but just really excited to kind of be here and playing this part and having this voice here at COP28.
That's a great way to end. Well, love the work you're doing, Andrea. Thank you for sharing your insights. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you.